On the early morning of February 15, 1994, 11 young lives ended in flames inside an abandoned building on Chicago's South Side. All members of the same street crew, all consumed by a fire that wasn't accident, wasn't chance, it was arson, deliberate and calculated, executed with chilling precision. The perpetrators, two brothers from the same neighborhood, Marcus and Terrell Johnson. They had grown up just 3 blocks away from their victims. The Chicago Fire Department would later classify it as one of the deadliest gang-related incidents of the 1990s. But the reason behind the inferno wasn't drugs, wasn't territory, wasn't even retaliation for a shooting. It was a leather jacket stolen during a dice game 2 weeks earlier, and two brothers who believed that disrespect, once given, demanded an answer written in fire. West Englewood stretched across Chicago's South Side like an open wound that never healed. In 1994, it covered 2 square miles, home to about 40,000 people, most of them African American, most of them struggling. Garfield Boulevard marked the north, Racine Avenue the east, Ashland Avenue the west. Old commercial buildings stood like tombstones, reminders of better times long gone. Population density meant you were never truly alone, yet everyone felt isolated, trapped in a place where the American dream had packed its bags and moved to the suburbs decades earlier. The winter of 1994 hit Chicago hard. February temperatures hovered in the low 20s by day, dropped to single digits at night. The cold had a particular bite on the South Side, coming off Lake Michigan, cutting through coats, settling deep in bones. Streets smelled of CTA bus exhaust, fried chicken from Harold's on 63rd, and the metallic tang of old radiators straining in buildings long past their prime. At night, the city itself seemed to groan, ice cracking in gutters, wind rattling chain-link fences, the distant clatter of the Green Line train looping endlessly. But 1994 wasn't just another hard winter. The city was transforming. The Chicago Housing Authority had begun demolishing the massive public housing projects, Robert Taylor Homes, Cabrini Green, Henry Horner. The official line was urban renewal. The reality was forced displacement. Thousands of families scattered into neighborhoods like West Englewood, bringing gang affiliations, old rivalries, and territorial claims that meant nothing in their new surroundings. The old gang structure shattered. The corporate-style organizations that had ruled Chicago's streets in the 1980s, the gangster disciples, the vice lords, the black disciples, fractured into dozens of smaller crews. No hierarchy, no rules, just blocks, corners, and young men willing to die for patches of concrete that weren't worth dying for. Marcus Anthony Johnson was 27 that February, though people said he looked older, worn down by years that demanded too much too soon. 6'2", lean, wiry, a scar cut through his left eyebrow, a permanent mark from a bottle in a teenage fight. It gave him a look of skepticism, like he was always questioning whatever you said. Every morning, Marcus woke at 6:15 in his basement apartment on South Hermitage. Instant coffee, Folgers, never cheap stuff. 2 Newports smoked on the back steps, then off to Big Mike's Auto Repair on Ashland Avenue. He'd worked there 4 years, could diagnose an engine by sound alone, paid $9 an hour under the table, no questions asked. Marcus lived alone. No wife, no kids, he claimed. His mother had died of breast cancer in 1989. His father, James Johnson, had been shot in 1987, caught in crossfire on 69th and Halstead. What Marcus valued most wasn't money. It was the code his father had taught him. Never let anyone make you look weak. Never back down from disrespect. Never forget where you came from. And never let someone take what's yours without consequences. His father left him almost nothing, no inheritance, no property, just one possession, a brown leather army jacket from the Korean War, old, cracked, torn lining, but it was all Marcus had left of the man who raised him to believe honor mattered, even when the world suggested otherwise.
By early 1994, Marcus was tired of the grind, tired of watching the neighborhood decay, tired of losing friends to bullets, prison, or crack cocaine. He wasn't trying to be a gangster, he just wanted to survive. His younger brother, Terrell, was different, 23, stocky, emotional, reactive. He felt everything intensely. Dropped out of high school, tried to join the army, rejected for a juvenile record.
He had a girlfriend, Shanice, 21, worked at a grocery store. They dreamed of marriage, of leaving West Englewood. But Terrell's defining trait was loyalty, absolute loyalty to Marcus. Marcus had raised him after their father died, fed him, clothed him, protected him. When you hurt Marcus, you hurt Terrell. When you disrespected Marcus, you disrespected them both. The brothers weren't close in the sentimental sense. They didn't talk about feelings, but they understood each other completely. They shared a code that required no words. The Ashland crew wasn't a gang in the traditional sense, just a loose collection of young men from the blocks around Ashland Avenue. Friends, cousins, kids who had grown up together. Safety in numbers. Raymond Thomas, Ray Ray, was the crew's unofficial leader. 22, tall, charismatic. A smile that could charm grandmothers and intimidate rivals. He'd been a decent basketball player at Englewood High, not good enough for college scouts. After graduation, he drifted. No job, no prospects, just corners and nights filled with monotony. Ray Ray wasn't a killer, wasn't a kingpin. Arrested twice, marijuana, retail theft, both dismissed. He still lived with his mother. His girlfriend, Keisha, 18, was 3 months pregnant. They talked about names. Raymond Jr. if a boy, Destiny if a girl. They'd never get the chance to decide. The crew included Antoine Mercer, 24, who had tried college before money ran out. Jerome Little, 21, who had a sanitation job interview scheduled for February 15th. Londa Price, 20, enrolled in a nursing assistant program 3 weeks from finishing. Darnell Hayes, 19, 3 months from graduation, writing rap lyrics in notebooks he carried everywhere. These weren't hardened criminals, but in West Englewood, even ordinary lives could be erased by one act of disrespect. They were kids, really, trapped in a place and time that offered limited options and unlimited ways to fail. They hung out together because that's what you did. Talked big about money, respect, and making it out of the neighborhood. But mostly they just passed time, waiting for something, anything that might change everything. The catalyst came on January 28, 1994, a Friday night so cold that ice formed in perfect geometric patterns on car windows. By midnight, the temperature had dropped to 8 degrees. 8 crew members, including Ray Ray, gathered in the basement of an abandoned building on Ashland Avenue, the same building where they'd be gathering 2 weeks later for a very different reason. They played dice, betting money nobody could afford to lose. Marcus Johnson showed up around 11:30 p.m., not part of the crew, but tolerated. Everyone knew his reputation, a man who didn't start trouble, but could finish it if pressed. He'd been invited by his younger brother, Terrell, who knew some of these guys from school. Marcus wore his father's leather jacket against the bitter cold. Inside, a space heater glowed orange, fighting a losing battle against Chicago winter. The game went bad around 1:15 a.m. Marcus was up $60, a fortune in that room. Ray Ray was down more than he could afford, drinking cheap liquor that sharpened his edges instead of dulling them. The details varied depending on who tells the story, but the outcome was clear. Words were exchanged. Marcus accused Ray Ray of cheating. Ray Ray laughed, said Marcus was too serious, maybe mocked the jacket, called it a shrine to his dead father. Marcus stood, said something quiet no one caught, and started to leave. That's when Ray Ray, emboldened by liquor and an audience, grabbed the jacket off of Marcus's shoulders, held it up like a trophy, said something about keeping it as payment for disrespecting him in front of his crew. The room went silent. Everyone knew they were watching something dangerous unfold. Antoine stepped forward, ready to fight. Marcus stopped him with a hand on his shoulder, looked at Ray Ray for a long moment, then walked out into the freezing night without his father's jacket. Terrell followed, confused, angry, ready to storm back in.
but Marcus kept walking, breath visible in the air, footsteps crunching on ice. 3 blocks later, he stopped. His face showed nothing. "Not tonight," Marcus said quietly, "but we're getting it back, and they're going to learn what it costs to take what ain't theirs." What Ray and the Ashland crew didn't know was that the jacket wasn't just leather and thread. It was the only thing Marcus had left of his father, the man who taught him that respect was currency more valuable than money, that some debts could only be paid one way. Marcus had inherited his father's patience along with that coat. He could wait. He could plan. He could turn cold fury into calculated action. And in exactly 17 days, on Valentine's Day, 1994, Marcus and his brother would make them pay for that moment of disrespect in a way that would shock even Chicago's violence-hardened South Side.
The week after the dice game moved slowly. Marcus went to work at Big Mike's Auto Repair every morning, methodical as ever. But his mind replayed that moment in the basement over and over. Ray holding the jacket like a trophy, Terrell's face when Marcus stopped him from fighting, their footsteps on frozen sidewalk, walking away empty-handed. Mike Torelli noticed something was off. On February 3rd, he found Marcus standing motionless in the garage bay, wrench in hand, staring at nothing. "You good, Marcus?" Mike asked. Marcus blinked, came back from wherever his mind had gone. "Yeah, Mike, I'm good." "You sure? You've been holding that wrench 5 minutes without moving." Mike studied him. He'd seen enough in 63 years to recognize when someone was carrying violence inside, nurturing it. "Whatever you're thinking about doing," Mike said quietly. "Think twice, then think a third time. Prison ain't worth it." Marcus nodded, said nothing, went back to work. But Mike's words didn't change anything. Some decisions get made deeper than thought, in the place where debts and consequences are calculated. On Sunday, February 6th, Marcus took his grandmother to church. Dorothy Johnson, 74, sharp as broken glass despite arthritis twisting her hands. After service, they sat in her kitchen, collard greens and cornbread filling the air with memory. "You've been quiet, baby," she said. "Something weighing on your mind?" Marcus ate slowly. "Just work, Grandma." She looked at him the way grandmothers do, seeing through lies. "Your daddy was a good man, but he had a hard streak, wouldn't back down from nothing, got him killed. You got that same streak, Marcus, I can see it. Whatever's happening, ask yourself if it's worth losing everything." Marcus wanted to tell her about the jacket, about the disrespect, but what could he say? That he was planning to hurt people over a piece of leather? Instead, he said, "I love you, Grandma. You know that, right?" "I know, baby, I know." That was Sunday. On Monday, everything started to change. Marcus began his preparation not with weapons, but with information. He moved through West Englewood like a ghost, watching, learning, mapping out the crew's patterns. He saw them gather at the abandoned building most nights, counted them, 6 on Tuesday, 8 on Wednesday, 7 on Thursday, 9 on Friday. They had a rhythm. They showed up between 10:30 and 11 a.m., drinking, smoking, playing cards, talking about money they didn't have and dreams that would never come true. Marcus noticed something else. The building had 2 exits, front door on Ashland, back door into an alley. Both opened outward, old Chicago fire code. Windows boarded solid on the ground floor. Second and third floor windows broken out, empty frames. Metal security grates inside the ground floor windows, obstacles to anyone trying to escape in a hurry. On Sunday, February 12th, Marcus drove to a hardware store on Western Avenue, 3 miles from the neighborhood, far enough that nobody would recognize him. And with each purchase, each observation, Marcus was building more than a plan. He was building a reckoning. Marcus didn't buy weapons first. He bought chains, 3 heavy-duty lengths, 6 feet each, the kind used to lock motorcycles or seal industrial gates. Thick links that would take bolt cutters to break. $47, cash, receipt folded into his pocket. At a second store in Bridgeport, he picked up 4 padlocks, brass cylinders, hardened steel shackles. $32, paid cash. At a gas station on Archer Avenue, Marcus filled 5 red plastic gasoline cans, 5 gallons each. The attendant, a Pakistani man who barely spoke English, didn't ask questions. 89 cents per gallon, paid cash.
Marcus loaded the cans into the trunk of a borrowed 1987 Buick Regal, told his cousin he needed to move some stuff, promised to return it Monday. His cousin asked no questions, because on the South Side, sometimes it was better not to know. Back in his apartment, Marcus spread a map across the kitchen table, marked the building with a red X, marked escape routes, police stations. The nearest was 6 blocks on Racine Avenue, response time maybe 5 to 8 minutes. Hospitals, Stroger downtown, too far to matter. Fire stations, Engine Company 61 on 63rd Street, 7 blocks away. While Marcus choreographed violence with cold precision, Terrell wrestled with doubt. On Wednesday night, February 9th, Shanice cornered him in their apartment. "Where you been going every night? And don't lie to me, Terrell. I know when you're lying." Terrell sat on the bed, head in his hands. Their studio apartment was small, fragile, imperfect, but it was home. Pictures on the wall, dishes in the sink, a life they'd built together. "Just helping Marcus with something," he said. "With what? What could Marcus need help with at midnight that's got you acting like you already in prison?"
Terrell looked at her. Shanice was beautiful, hair pulled back, uniform still on from the grocery store. She deserved better. Better than him. Better than this. "Some guys disrespected him," Terrell said carefully. "Took something that belonged to our father. We're getting it back." "Getting it back? How?" Terrell didn't answer. Shanice sat beside him, took his hand. "Whatever Marcus is planning, you don't have to be part of it. You always talk about getting out of here, moving somewhere better. This ain't the way, baby. This is the way you stay trapped forever." He knew she was right. Rationally, he saw the consequences. But another part of him remembered his father bleeding out while strangers took pictures. Remembered Marcus raising him when their mother couldn't. Remembered loyalty. "I can't let him do this alone," Terrell whispered. "He's my brother." Shanice pulled her hand away. "Then I guess you made your choice." Something broke between them that night. Trust that might never be repaired. Meanwhile, Ray Thomas was at his mother's place, watching the Bulls game on a fuzzy TV. Michael Jordan was dismantling the Knicks. His mother, Linda, 51, worn down by decades of single motherhood, brought him spaghetti. "You staying out of trouble?" she asked, the same question since he was 12. "Yeah, Ma, I'm good." Ray's girlfriend, Keisha, was showing now. A baby coming, real life pressing in. And in his room, Marcus's father's leather jacket hung on a chair. He hadn't worn it, wasn't sure he wanted to. Taking it had seemed funny at the time, a way to assert dominance, but now it felt stupid, childish. He thought about giving it back, leaving it somewhere Marcus would find it. No words, no apology, just make the problem disappear. But pride wouldn't let him. Giving it back would look weak, soft, and in 1994 on the South Side, soft meant vulnerable, meant dead. Ray didn't know Marcus had already decided, didn't know about the chains and padlocks in the Buick's trunk, didn't know that in less than 48 hours, his decision to keep that jacket would cost him everything. On Sunday night, February 13th, Marcus and Terrell sat at their grandmother's kitchen table. Dorothy asleep upstairs, radiator hissing like it had for 40 years. On the table, 2 sets of work gloves, 3 chains, 4 padlocks, keys to the borrowed Buick. "You sure about this?" Terrell asked. Marcus looked at him, really looked. Terrell was 23, but still carried traces of the kid Marcus had raised. He had a girlfriend, a job, a chance, slim but real, at something better. "You don't have to be there," Marcus said. "I can do this alone." "That ain't what I asked. I asked if you're sure." Marcus was quiet. Was he sure? In the sense of knowing disrespect demanded an answer, yes. In the sense of knowing tomorrow might mean prison or death, no. "They took Dad's jacket," Marcus said finally. "They laughed, made us walk away weak. Tomorrow, we take it back. Beat their asses if we have to. But this," Terrell gestured at the chains and locks, "this is something else, something we can't take back." "I know." Terrell thought of Shanice, thought of the future she wanted, then reached across the table, picked up a pair of gloves, pocketed them. "If you're doing this, I'm there. That's the only choice I got." At 11:47 p.m.,
They left their grandmother's house. Marcus kissed her forehead as she slept, whispered something she didn't hear. Downstairs, they loaded chains and gasoline into the Buick's trunk. The night was cold, 17 degrees, breath visible in white clouds. Terrell knew what his brother was planning. He'd seen that look before, the flat, emotionless stare their father wore the night before he died, the look of a man who had already made peace with hell. Marcus had worn it for 2 weeks. Now, Terrell felt it settling onto his own face. They sat in the car, Marcus's hands on the wheel, Terrell's hands in his lap. Brothers, separated by 4 years and a lifetime of shared history. Last chance to walk away, Marcus said. Terrell thought about Shanice, about the apartment, about the life they dreamed of. Then he thought about his brother, about loyalty, about the code their father had taught them before a bullet ended his lessons. And as the Buick rolled into the night, the Johnson brothers carried chains, gasoline, and a destiny they couldn't escape. February 14th, 1994, Valentine's Day. While Chicago's South Side prepared for roses, cards, and fleeting romance, 2 brothers drove silently through West Englewood. In the trunk of their borrowed Buick Regal lay 3 heavy chains, 4 padlocks, and 5 gasoline cans. Their destination? An abandoned building at 6743 South Ashland. Their mission? Vengeance. The streets were nearly empty. The temperature had dropped to 19 degrees, the kind of cold that made breath crystallize instantly and turned exposed skin into aching stone. Streetlights flickered weakly, casting yellow pools on cracked pavement.
A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Then silence returned. Marcus Johnson sat behind the wheel, engine off, hands resting calmly on the steering wheel. He had expected fear, maybe trembling hands. Instead, he felt a strange emptiness, a clarity so cold it seemed inhuman. He wasn't Marcus the mechanic anymore. He was Marcus the executioner, watching himself from outside his own body. Beside him, Terrell sat rigid, fists clenched, knuckles white. His breath fogged the inside of the car. Marcus could feel his brother's doubt, the desperate hope that maybe they'd turn around. "Last chance to walk away," Marcus said quietly. "You can get out right now. Take the L train home." Terrell turned to him, eyes searching. "You really gonna do this over a jacket?" Marcus's voice was flat. "It was never about the jacket. It's about them thinking they can disrespect us and walk away laughing. They're going to die. All of them." Terrell swallowed hard. A long silence stretched between them. Then he whispered, "I'm with you, all the way." 10:58 p.m. They stepped out of the Buick. The cold hit like a hammer. From the trunk, they pulled gloves, chains, padlocks, and the gasoline cans. Marcus moved toward the front door, Terrell toward the back alley. The plan was simple, rehearsed in Marcus's mind 100 times. Chain the exit shut, pour gasoline around the foundation, strike a match. 11:04 p.m. Marcus approached the front door. Music drifted from inside, bass heavy, muffled. Laughter, voices arguing over cards. Normal sounds of young men killing time, unaware their time was ending. Marcus wrapped the chain through the door handle, looped it around a rusted support beam. The chain rattled too loud in the night. He froze. Inside, the laughter continued. No one had heard. He locked the padlock, tested it. The door wouldn't open more than 2 inches now. Around back, Terrell did the same. Marcus imagined his brother's hands shaking, conscience battling loyalty. But Terrell was a Johnson, family over fear, always. 11:11 p.m. They stepped out of the Buick. The cold hit once more. No words, just gasoline cans. Marcus poured slowly, methodically, tracing a perimeter around the building's foundation. The liquid gurgled, splashing against concrete, seeping into cracks. The smell was sharp, chemical, overwhelming. Terrell worked faster, erratic, panic rising. His movements betrayed the war inside him, fear versus loyalty, survival versus brotherhood, but he kept pouring. 11:23 p.m. All 5 cans were empty. The building was encircled in fuel. The air reeked of gasoline, stinging their eyes. Inside, the crew laughed, shouted, played cards.
11 people, oblivious to the death tightening around them. Marcus pulled a book of matches from his pocket. One small stick of wood and phosphorus, the line between thought and action. He thought of his father, of the code, of his grandmother's warning. Ask yourself if it's worth it losing everything. Was it worth it? Marcus struck the match. A tiny flame danced in the freezing air. Still time to blow it out, still time to walk away. But Ray had laughed, had taken the jacket, had made Marcus look weak. Marcus dropped the match. 11:27 p.m. Gasoline ignited with a soft whoosh that became a roar. Flames raced along the perimeter, climbing walls, pouring through cracks. The orange light bloomed, turning night into hell. Inside, the first scream came at 11:28 p.m. Marcus and Terrell stood across the street, watching. The fire spread faster than Marcus had imagined. Within 90 seconds, the ground floor was engulfed. Smoke poured thick and black. Screams multiplied. Someone tried the front door. Chains rattled. Faces pressed against the gap. Eyes wide with terror. Mouths open. Words lost in the roar. "Oh God," Terrell whispered. "Oh Jesus Christ, what did we do?" Marcus said nothing. His void was complete. 11:33 p.m. A window on the second floor exploded outward. Shards of glass rained onto the sidewalk. The building had become a furnace. And as the flames devoured the building, the Johnson brothers watched respect transform into massacre. 11:37 p.m. A figure appeared in the window. Keisha Wallace, 3 months pregnant, desperate, silhouetted against the flames. For 3 seconds, she stood there, calculating impossible odds. Fire behind her, a 25-foot drop below. Then she jumped. The impact was immediate and final. Her body hit the concrete with a wet, heavy thud. Bones breaking, organs rupturing, life ending. That sound would haunt Terrell Johnson for the rest of his life. Yet Keisha was luckier than the ones still inside. On the 3rd floor, 3 crew members had retreated as high as they could go, flames climbing the stairwell like living creatures, consuming wood, drywall, and paint that released poison as it burned. They smashed windows with their fists, desperate for air that was slightly less toxic.
Antoine Mercer, 24, former college student, managed to push his upper body through a window frame. He looked down, saw Keisha's body sprawled on the sidewalk, saw Marcus and Terrell standing across the street. "Help us!" Antoine screamed, voice raw from smoke. "Please call the fire department, we're dying!" Marcus looked up. Their eyes met across the distance. Antoine saw something in Marcus's face, a void, a deliberate calm, and understood. This wasn't an accident. Someone had decided they should die. "Why?" Antoine screamed. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus didn't answer. The question didn't deserve one. Ray knew why. That was enough. 11:41 p.m. Flames reached the 3rd floor. Antoine disappeared into smoke. His screams continued for 37 seconds, then stopped. 2 blocks away, Linda Martinez was closing her corner grocery store, counting receipts. $247, not bad for a Monday. She hummed a tune from the radio, thinking about her granddaughter's birthday party. Through her window, she saw orange light reflected on buildings, smelled smoke on the wind, thought someone was burning trash. In West Englewood, you learn not to ask too many questions about strange things at night. 11:43 p.m. Darnell Hayes, 19, 3 months from graduation, reached a 2nd-floor window. His notebook of rap lyrics was already burning downstairs. He gripped the ledge, tried to lower himself to reduce the drop. His hands, slick with sweat and soot, slipped. He fell 20 feet, landed feet first, both legs shattered, the sound like branches snapping, compound fractures, bone protruding through skin. He lay screaming in the alley, unable to move. Above him, flames roared from the window he'd just escaped. Darnell would survive, the only one. But his legs would never heal. He'd walk with a cane for the rest of his life. Constant pain, constant reminder of Valentine's Day,
1994. 11:47 p.m. In the basement, Ray Thomas was trapped. Smoke and heat descended with merciless efficiency. The heater spacer that had kept them warm was now cruel irony. They would die from heat, from flames, from tongues filling with superheated air and toxic chemicals. Ray thought of his mother, of Keisha and the baby he'd never meet, of the leather jacket hanging in his bedroom, taken as a joke, a power move, something stupid that seemed important 2 weeks ago. He understood now. Marcus had done this. Nobody else had reason. Ray had crossed a line without realizing it, and now the price was being paid in full. 7 other crew members crowded around him. Jerome Little, Leanda Price, others whose names would later be listed in police reports, identified by dental records. Smoke was thick enough to cut, black and oily. They couldn't see each other anymore, only coughing, crying, prayers to a God who wasn't answering tonight. I'm sorry for whatever I did. But sorry didn't matter. Debt had been calculated. Blood was the only currency accepted. 11:52 p.m. The building's structure failed. Support beams, weakened by fire, gave way. The 3rd floor collapsed into the 2nd into the 1st. Everything fell into the basement, crushing 8 people under thousands of pounds of burning debris. The screaming stopped. Marcus watched the collapse. Flames shot 50 feet into the air. Sparks carried on the wind like fireflies from hell. Beside him, Terrell shook, crying. We gotta go, Marcus. We gotta go right now. But Marcus couldn't move. He stood frozen, watching his work, watching 11 lives end because of a jacket, a father's code, and a need for respect that had metastasized into murder. Somewhere in that fire was the jacket itself, burning to ash. Had it been worth it? Marcus didn't know, couldn't know. There was no scale to measure respect against lives. Only fire, only death, only the understanding that he had crossed into territory from which there was no return. 11:56 p.m. Sirens finally cut through the night. Fire engines from Engine Company 61, 7 blocks away. Someone had called it in, maybe Linda Martinez, maybe another witness. Response time was good by Southside standards, but it didn't matter. Everyone inside was already dead or dying. Now, Marcus said quietly, now we go. They walked back to the Buick, not running. Running drew attention. Marcus started the engine, pulled away carefully, turned south on Ashland Avenue. In the rearview mirror, the building burned like a second sun, flames visible for miles. Terrell hunched in the passenger seat, face in his hands, shoulders shaking. What did we do, Marcus? What the hell did we do? Marcus drove in silence. What could he say? That it was justice? That it was necessary? That Ray and his crew had brought it on themselves? All of those things were true. None of them mattered. 11 people were dead. 11 families destroyed. And for what? A jacket, a principle, a code that demanded blood for disrespect. 12:14 a.m., February 15th, 1994. They reached Marcus's apartment.
Valentine's Day was over. The day after had begun. Inside, they stripped off their clothes, stuffed them into a garbage bag, gloves, jackets, anything that smelled of gasoline or smoke. Marcus wanted to burn it all, but he'd already created enough fire for one lifetime. They showered, Marcus first, standing under hot water until it ran cold, watching residue swirl down the drain along with any claim to humanity. When he closed his eyes, he saw faces at the window, heard screams, saw Keisha jumping. Terrell showered next. Marcus heard him crying, vomiting until nothing came out but bile and guilt. 1:30 a.m. They sat in Marcus's kitchen, silent. The television played a late-night talk show, audience laughter filling the room like static. They're gonna know it was us, Terrell said finally. Someone saw, someone had to. I know. So what do we do? Marcus looked at his brother.
Terrell looked younger now, small, broken. "We wait," Marcus said. "We wait for them to come, and then we face what we did." But the blood had been shed, the debt had been paid, the jacket was ash. 11 people had learned, too late, that some disrespect carries consequences no one survives. 6:47 a.m., Tuesday, February 15th, 1994. When firefighters finally controlled the blaze enough to enter, they found remains that would take days to identify, families that would never recover, a community scarred forever. Marcus Johnson had gotten his respect, had proven that nobody could take what was his and walk away laughing. But the price of that respect, paid in fire, paid in lives, was higher than any code, any principle, any father's teaching could ever justify. And as dawn broke over Chicago, the fire's smoke carried more than ash. It carried questions of justice, vengeance, and the unbearable cost of respect. 6:47 a.m., February 15th, 1994. Michael O'Donnell was 43 years old, 21 years with the Chicago Fire Department. He had pulled bodies from house fires before, one, maybe two victims, people who had fallen asleep with cigarettes or left space heaters too close to curtains. He had seen burn victims, knew what fire did to human flesh, and had learned to compartmentalize the horror so he could keep working. But when he entered what had been the basement of 6743 South Ashland Avenue, when his flashlight beam cut through smoke and revealed what the collapse had created, a mass grave of charred debris and human remains so intermingled it was impossible to tell where one body ended and another began, Michael froze. 30 seconds felt like hours. Then he backed out, walked 20 feet away, pulled off his helmet and breathing apparatus, and vomited onto the frozen sidewalk. "How many?" his captain asked. Michael's voice shook. "I don't know. 8? Maybe 10? Maybe more." He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't find words for what he had seen. By 8:30 a.m., the scene was crawling with personnel. Chicago police homicide detectives, fire investigators, medical examiner staff preparing body bags, though they would need hours more for the structure to cool enough for recovery. Yellow crime scene tape stretched 3 blocks in every direction. Detective Raymond Walsh arrived at 9:15 a.m. He was 41, 19 years with CPD, assigned to Area 2 homicide. He had investigated gang shootings, domestic murders, robbery killings. He had seen Chicago's violence in most of its variations, but never anything like this. Fire investigator Susan Chen, 15 years on the job, met him at the perimeter. Her face was grim. "Definitely arson," she said. Accelerant, gasoline poured around the foundation, both exits chained and padlocked from the outside. This wasn't an accident. Someone locked them in and burned them alive. Walsh felt his stomach tighten. "How many victims?" "Won't know until the ME finishes recovery, but at least 10, possibly 11 or 12. Walsh exhaled. "Jesus Christ." There was one survivor, a 19-year-old male, Darnell Hayes, who had jumped from a second-floor window, both legs shattered. He was at Stroger Hospital in critical condition, sedated for pain. But when conscious in the ambulance, he had repeated 2 names, Marcus and Terrell. Meanwhile, 2 miles away on South Hermitage Avenue, Dorothy Johnson was making breakfast for her grandsons like she had every Tuesday morning for decades. Eggs and toast, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The kitchen smelled like home, like safety, like the life she had built over 74 years in the neighborhood. Marcus and Terrell sat at her table, neither eating, their faces hollow, sleepless. Dorothy had seen that look before, on her son's face the week before he was shot down in 1987, the look of men who had crossed into territory they could never return from. "You boys need to tell me what's wrong," she said, setting plates in front of them. Marcus looked at his grandmother, wanted to confess, wanted to explain, wanted her to say it would be okay even though he knew it never would be. But the words wouldn't come. "Just tired, Grandma," he said quietly. Dorothy sat down, her arthritic hands wrapped around her coffee mug. "The news this morning said there was a fire on Ashland, said people died, said it was arson." Neither brother spoke. "Marcus Anthony Johnson," Dorothy said, her voice sharp with the authority of generations. "Look at me." Marcus met her eyes. "Did you have something to do with that fire?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus wanted to lie, to protect her from the truth, but he had never been able to lie to his grandmother. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. Dorothy's face didn't change, but tears rolled down her weathered cheeks. "How many people?" "They're saying 11. She closed her eyes, sat in silence, crying. When she opened them again, they were red but clear. "Your father taught you to stand up for yourself, to never let anyone disrespect you, but he never taught you to be a murderer." "They took his jacket, Grandma. They laughed about it." "So you burned them alive? 11 people over a jacket?" Her voice broke on the last word. Terrell was crying now too, face in his hands. "We didn't mean for it to be like that. We just wanted... I don't know what we wanted, but not this. Not this." Dorothy's voice was sharp with grief and fury. "You chain the doors and light a fire and think people are just going to walk away? You committed murder, not in self-defense, not in a fight. You planned it. You executed it. You killed children." "They weren't children." 19 is a child. 18 is a child. One of those girls was pregnant." Dorothy stood, shaking with rage and sorrow. "You took a woman's unborn baby. You destroyed families who did nothing but exist in the same neighborhood as you." By noon Tuesday, Detective Walsh had established a timeline. The fire reported at 11:34 p.m. Valentine's night. First engine on scene at 11:41 p.m. Fully engulfed, both exits chained. Witnesses reported seeing 2 men near the building around 11:15 p.m. Vague descriptions: black males, mid-20s, average height. The survivor, Darnell Hayes, regained consciousness around 10 a.m. Through morphine haze, he told investigators what he remembered: basement party, smoke, fire, exits blocked, panic. He had made it to a second-floor window, jumped, remembered hitting the ground. Nothing after that until waking in the hospital. But he remembered the names, Marcus and Terrell. He had heard them mentioned at the dice game 2 weeks ago when the jacket was taken. Walsh ran the names. Marcus Anthony Johnson, 27, 1 prior arrest, aggravated assault at 17, charges dropped. Worked at an auto repair shop. Terrell James Johnson, 23, juvenile record sealed, worked at a warehouse. By 2 p.m., Walsh had motive. Witnesses told the same story. Ray Thomas and his crew had taken Marcus's leather jacket during a dice game, a disrespect situation. Marcus had walked away, but people said he had that look, the quiet anger that doesn't fade. 11 people dead over a jacket, Walsh said to his partner, Detective Maria Sanchez. "Not the first time," Sanchez replied. "Here, disrespect is currency. You let someone punk you, word gets around. Usually it's a beating, sometimes a shooting. But this," she gestured toward the apartment where Marcus and Terrell were inside. "This is something else." 3:17 p.m., Tuesday, February 15th. 8 officers approached the apartment on South Hermitage, armor body, weapons drawn, expecting resistance, expecting maybe a shootout. What they found was Marcus and Terrell Johnson sitting at their grandmother's kitchen table, unarmed, hands visible. Dorothy Johnson stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, looking 10 years older than she had that morning. "Marcus Anthony Johnson, Terrell James Johnson," Walsh said, weapon trained. "You're arrested for 11 counts of first-degree murder and aggravated arson. Stand up slowly, keep your hands where we can see them." Marcus stood, movement slow, deliberate, calm, like he had been expecting this, like some part of him was relieved it was finally over. "We're not going to resist," Marcus said quietly. "We did what we did. Now we'll face what comes next." Terrell was shaking now too, tears running down his face, but he raised his hands without argument. Officers cuffed them both, found no weapons, no evidence, just guilt crit across their faces. As Walsh led Marcus toward the door, Dorothy grabbed her grandson's arm. "Why?" she whispered. "Just tell me why." Marcus looked at her, the grandmother who had raised him, who had survived losing her husband, losing her son, and now had to watch her grandsons destroy themselves over pride and a leather jacket. "Because I'm my father's son," Marcus said. "He taught me never to let anyone disrespect me." Dorothy's voice broke. "Your father died with his code."
And as the Johnson brothers were led away in handcuffs, Chicago prepared for a trial that would test the meaning of justice, vengeance, and the unbearable cost of pride. Dorothy Johnson's words cut deeper than any judge's gavel. "That jacket your father left you? It burned in that fire, Marcus. It's ash. Everything you did, every person you killed, it was all for something that doesn't even exist anymore." Police led Marcus and Terrell away, leaving Dorothy standing in her doorway, watching squad cars disappear into the distance. She knew she would likely never see her grandsons free again. By Tuesday evening, the news had spread through West Englewood like wildfire. 11 dead, the Johnson brothers responsible. The neighborhood erupted in debate. At Harold's Chicken on 63rd Street, conversations grew heated. Some called Marcus and Terrell monsters who'd murdered innocent people in cold blood. Others said they were men driven to desperate measures by disrespect in a culture where disrespect could get you killed. "I'm not saying what they did was right," said Jerome Washington, barber on Ashland Avenue, who had known Marcus since childhood. "But I understand it. You grow up here, respect is all you got. Money comes and goes, jobs disappear. But if you let someone make you look weak, you become prey." Marcus was following the same code every man on these streets follows. He just took it further than most. But the families of the victims demanded justice. 11 families destroyed. Kesha Wallace's mother stood outside the burned building holding a sonogram photo, the baby that would never be born. Antoine Mercer's father, who had worked 2 jobs to put his son through college, held his son's business textbooks. Jerome Little's mother brought the suit her son had bought for his job interview, still wrapped in dry cleaning plastic. At Greater Mount Zion Baptist Church, Pastor Elijah Thompson struggled through Tuesday's service. We ask why? Why this violence? Why this loss? Why couldn't young men resolve their differences without bloodshed? He had no answers, only grief. His congregation had been cut in half by one night when honor became murder and respect became ash. The neighborhood split down the middle. Some understood Marcus's code even if they couldn't condone his actions. Others saw only 11 lives ended, 11 families destroyed, and demanded the harshest punishment. The trial. By September 1994, the case had attracted national attention, one of the deadliest gang-related arsons in Chicago history. 11 victims, 2 brothers who had planned and executed mass murder over a stolen jacket. The charges? 43 counts of first-degree murder and aggravated arson. The prosecution had overwhelming evidence. Chains and padlocks recovered from the scene, gasoline residue traced to purchases at multiple locations, witnesses who had seen 2 men matching the brothers' descriptions near the building, survivor testimony from Darnell Hayes, who named Marcus and Terrell. The defense, 2 exhausted public defenders, argued temporary insanity, claiming extreme disrespect in a culture where disrespect could be fatal. They painted Marcus and Terrell as products of a war zone, raised by a father who taught honor was everything. Witnesses testified about Southside violence, about the code of respect that governs street life. The prosecution dismantled the argument in 3 hours. Temporary insanity doesn't involve 2 weeks of planning, doesn't involve buying chains and padlocks, doesn't involve surveillance and escape route mapping. This wasn't madness. This was premeditated mass murder dressed up in the language of honor and respect. The jury, 12 Chicagoans who understood urban violence but hadn't lived West Englewood's specific pressures, deliberated 19 hours over 3 days. September 28, 1994. Verdict: guilty. All charges, both defendants. 2 weeks later, sentencing. Marcus Anthony Johnson, life in prison without parole. Terrell James Johnson,
life in prison without parole. Marcus showed no emotion, no tears, no shock, just a slight nod, as if he knew from the moment he struck that match that this was where he would end up. Terrell broke down crying, but Marcus remained stone-faced, accepting his fate with the same cold calculation he had brought to planning the fire. Marcus asked for 5 minutes with his grandmother. The request was denied. The long aftermath. Marcus Johnson served 30 years at Menard Correctional Center in southern Illinois. He worked in the prison library, teaching inmates to read, helping them prepare for GED exams. Guards said he was one of the most disciplined inmates they had ever known. Quiet, methodical, almost peaceful. Dorothy Johnson visited every month for 18 years, taking the Greyhound bus 6 hours each way. She never missed a visit until her health failed. She died in 2012, age 86.
Marcus wasn't allowed to attend her funeral. According to the chaplain, he didn't cry. He sat in his cell for 3 days, refused meals, and when he emerged, he looked 10 years older. March 3, 2024. Marcus Johnson died of a heart attack in the prison infirmary at age 57. His last coherent words: "Tell Terrell I'm sorry. Tell him it wasn't worth it." He was buried in the prison cemetery with a simple marker: Marcus A. Johnson, 1966-2024. No mention of father, brother, or son. Just dates marking the beginning and end of a life that had transformed from honest work to unthinkable violence. Terrell Johnson remains incarcerated at Stateville Correctional Center outside Chicago. He is 53 now. Parole denied in 2014 and again in 2024. Unlike his brother, Terrell never found peace. He has been written up dozens of times for fighting, spent years in segregation, struggles with depression and PTSD. In a rare 2019 interview, Terrell said, "Every night I see their faces. Every night I hear them screaming. Marcus told me it would be worth it, that we'd get respect, but I ain't got respect. I just got nightmares and a cell I'll die in." Shanice, Terrell's girlfriend, tried to stay connected for a year. She visited 3 times, then stopped. Married someone else in 1997, moved to Atlanta. On the 20th anniversary of the fire, she told reporters only, "That was a different life. I'm not that person anymore." Dorothy's apartment on South Hermitage was sold after her death. The new owners don't know its history. Don't know that 2 brothers planned mass murder at that kitchen table. Don't know that a grandmother cried herself to sleep every night, wondering where she had failed. Darnell Hayes, the sole survivor, lived but never truly recovered. 6 surgeries, chronic pain, permanent limp. He works part-time at a community center, lives on disability. In interviews, he says, "I survived the fire, but I didn't survive what it did to my head. I got survivor's guilt, PTSD, pain that wakes me up every night. Sometimes I think maybe dying would have been easier." The families of the 11 victims scattered across Chicago and beyond. Each carried grief too heavy to put down. Keisha Wallace's mother died of a stroke in 2003, aged 54, consumed by grief. Antoine Mercer's father moved to Atlanta, died in 2011, never speaking publicly about his son's death. Jerome Little's mother turned his room into a shrine, preserved exactly as he left it. On February 14th each year, she gives tours to at-risk youth, showing them what violence destroys. And as the years passed, the Johnson brothers' story became more than a crime. It became a cautionary tale about honor, respect, and the terrible price of vengeance. "My son died for nothing," one mother tells at-risk youth, "over a jacket, over respect that don't mean nothing when you're dead." Her words echo the truth. Codes that demand blood for disrespect only leave grief behind. Yet even in the darkness, small lights flickered. LaShonda Price's family created a nursing scholarship in her name at the vocational school where she had been studying. Since 1995, the LaShonda Price Memorial Scholarship has helped 37 young women from the South Side complete nursing assistance programs. A fragile attempt to make meaning from meaninglessness.
West Englewood changed after that Valentine's Day night, but not in the ways people hoped. Police presence increased, community meetings were held, intervention programs were promised. Within 5 years, budget cuts erased most of them. Violence continued, disrespect still demanded answers. Young men still died over principles that never survived them. The code Marcus followed, never let anyone disrespect you, always hit back, protect your honor at all costs, persists because the conditions that birthed it persist. Poverty, broken families, absent institutions, communities where respect is the only currency left. Detective Raymond Walsh, who investigated the case, retired in 2015 after 37 years of service. In a 2020 podcast interview, he said, "Technically, Marcus and Terrell Johnson were mass murderers. Legally, there's no question, but morally, it's more complicated. They grew up in a place where disrespect could get you killed, where letting someone punk you marked you as prey. They were following rules they'd been taught since childhood. The law says one thing, the street says another. That contradiction is something I've had to live with every day since February 15, 1994. Marcus Johnson's story has no heroes. It has 2 brothers who loved each other more than their own futures, and 11 young people whose choices, some careless, some cruel, some simply human, set tragedy in motion.
It has a system that failed at every level. Neighborhoods abandoned by investment, schools that couldn't educate, police who couldn't protect, families broken by poverty and violence, and a code of honor so rigid it made mass murder seem like the only response to disrespect. Were Marcus and Terrell Johnson murderers? Yes. They chained doors, poured gasoline, and burned 11 people alive. Were they also products of a broken system, raised in a culture where survival demanded violent responses to disrespect? Also, yes. The disturbing truth is both can be true simultaneously, and that forces us to ask questions we'd rather avoid. What would we do in their place? How far would we go to protect our honor? Does justice exist when the system has completely failed? Is there a line between righteous anger and unforgivable violence, or do impossible circumstances erase that line entirely? The Johnson brothers crossed a boundary no human being should cross, but that boundary existed in a world where disrespect could be fatal, where codes of honor replaced absent institutions, where a stolen jacket could mean the difference between being seen as strong or being marked as prey. There is no easy answer, no clear moral, no satisfying conclusion where good triumphs and evil is punished. Only a terrible truth. Violence breeds violence. Broken systems create monsters, and sometimes the line between justice and revenge disappears entirely, leaving only ashes and questions. 30 years have passed since that Valentine's Day night. West Englewood hasn't healed. It has adapted, struggled, found new ways to survive. Families still face impossible choices when systems fail them. Some choose violence, some survive, others don't. But all carry the weight of living in a city where justice doesn't always reach forgotten neighborhoods. The building at 6743 South Ashland Avenue was demolished in 1995. Today, it's just an empty lot, weeds pushing through cracked concrete. No memorial, no plaque, no marker explaining that 11 people burned alive there. Children play on the sidewalk where Keisha Wallace's body hit the pavement. Families walk past, unaware of the history beneath their feet. Life covers scars with layers of normalcy until they almost disappear. Almost. On cold February nights, neighbors say they still smell smoke. They don't, of course, but memory has its own logic. And in Chicago's South Side, some debts never get settled. They just keep collecting interest, generation after generation, code after code, until someone finally asks the question nobody wants to answer. When does honor become horror? When does respect become murder?
And how many more people have to die before we understand that revenge doesn't heal, it only creates new wounds? Marcus Johnson saved his pride but lost his freedom and eventually his life. He responded to disrespect but created 11 shattered families. He followed his father's code but proved that some codes cost more than they are worth. In the end, only one question remains, one each of us must answer for ourselves. Was it worth it? If this story made you think about honor, revenge, and the price we pay for codes that demand blood, leave your like and share this video. Subscribe for more true stories that challenge what we think we know about right and wrong, about street justice and the law, about how far ordinary people will go when taught that disrespect demands an answer. Comment below. What would you have done in Marcus Johnson's position? Where do you draw the line between standing up for yourself and becoming a murderer? Because these stories aren't just history. They're happening right now in forgotten neighborhoods where codes replace institutions and young men are taught that respect is worth dying and killing for. Until next time, remember, the monsters we fear aren't always born that way. Sometimes they're made. One broken code, one stolen jacket, one desperate decision at a time.